Hello and welcome to today's webinar on how to run a successful legal AI pilot. Okay, so my name's Kristin, I'm the VP of Customer Success here at LEGALFLY, and I'm joined today with Harry Day, our Legal Solutions Engineer. And between the both of us, we have supported a number of legal AI pilots across in-house teams for different sizes, risk levels, industries. And so what we're sharing today is really very much a shared experience of what we've seen work, specifically with real teams. So we're going to focus on what makes a legal AI pilot successful, to what teams you need to know before getting started, and then we'll move into a quick demonstration and then our Q&A, as we mentioned. So the goal for today is to just give you a more practical framework that you can apply when running or evaluating a legal AI pilot within your own organization. So when teams run legal AI pilots, one thing generally becomes very clear, which is that generic Gen AI is not always designed for legal decision making. General purpose tools can produce confident answers, but during a pilot, they do struggle with things that legal teams actually need to validate, like aligning with internal standards or consistency across documents. And that predictability is really important for how companies are going to assess risk within the tools that they use and adopt. And that's why many pilots kind of stall, not because the AI that they're using is bad, but more because it's not grounding in how an AI or how a legal team actually works. And that gap, LEGALFLY is designed to really address where teams are able to move from pilot and rollout with confidence. We're going to talk a little bit more about the pilots and how it's important to have that activity or how having activity without clarity can be a bit of a detriment. And often we see pilots stall the most when the goals are not clear, there's not exact workflows that need to be set up or tested, and the biggest pitfall that we see with teams is that they're not aligned on what success actually looks like. Now, this doesn't mean that you have to have success criteria for every single point you're putting across, but it would be helpful to know exactly what does success look like? What do we want this output to be? So when that doesn't happen, the pilot generates a lot of activity with testing, but very little clarity on what exactly they should be testing for. So in that case, we end up with teams that are having a bit of a mixed result. And that activity without clarity really leads to, it definitely rarely leads to success. And Harry, considering you have examples of an experience with different teams, where would you say from where teams did a lot of testing, where maybe they struggled to reach a decision, and why?
Yeah, I think this is something really important in pilots and something that I really do try to kind of drill in. You really do want to be focused. And I've seen kind of both sides of the coin of this. I've seen where we've come in, we're talking maybe 100 users, 100 plus use cases. And that might sound good. You're like, well, we're going to have loads of activity. We're going to be able to get lots of opinions and kind of feedback on the tool. But what I've actually found is it becomes too diffuse. There's no kind of responsibility. And then when it comes to making that decision, because they haven't identified one or two use cases that are really key, and then maybe a few extras that are nice to have, it's really hard to actually make a business decision based off of that. Mm-hmm. On the flip side, I've seen it where we've had maybe the right number of users, so maybe between 10 and 20 of a focus group. We've identified 5 use cases that are actually really going to help, but then we've had really low usage. Mm. And so actually by hitting that middle ground and making sure that people are very clear about what they want to test, why they're using the platform, and actually when they're going to do it throughout the pilot, that's kind of the Goldilocks zone of sort of at least setting up for success and starting on the right foot, instead of then having to try and drive usage across 100 users and then being like, well, which one do I test?
That could also be difficult when you have a lot of different areas that you're trying to focus on at once. Exactly. I think clear goals make pilots easier to evaluate. The most successful pilots are designed to answer a few different questions, which is, what do we need to prove in order to move forward? what would give us the confidence to roll this out more widely? And just as importantly, what would stop us from moving forward? And in your example previously, would you kind of relate that to a question that a client maybe has defined or hasn't defined up front in order to be able to get to that success clarity aha moment?
So I think definitely the most common question that we see cropping up is like, how can I review a third-party contract in line with our playbook, our existing contract, our preferred positions? So it's very, very broad, that because businesses are reviewing all types of contracts. Where we then might want to make that more specific for a pilot is, what are your really high volume contracts? What are you dealing with on a regular, daily, weekly, monthly basis? This is a really good example because we know what good looks like. This is something the team are doing on a regular basis, so we can benchmark against this. So it's a really specific example that we can use to make sure that this pilot or this particular use case is successful or not, which allows the business to make a decision.
Mm-hmm. What's also really important with that is communication. I think that piece of it is also really helpful. If you're not communicating what that evaluation should look like at the end, it's going to be even harder for the team to kind of get on the same page there. I think this type of framework we've seen work consistently in legal AI pilots before. So one area that's interesting is that teams often rush or skip step 2 or 3, which is clarifying success and aligning on those standards, and that's usually where we see problems start. So if you are trying to skip those few steps, you may not be able to get to that end result that you need. And without those steps, the teams really struggle to trust the outputs, and decision making becomes more subjective rather than evidence-based. And the first and arguable most important decision teams need to make is deciding on what use cases to start with. So I think generally in practice, most teams really begin with contract review, not because it's flashy, not because but more because it's practical. It's high volume, day-to-day legal work, it's repetitive, and more crucially, teams already have a clear sense of what good looks like, and that makes it much easier to evaluate the pilot more objectively, because if you're going through this process manually, you know what the end result is, so it's easier to be able to gauge what would that look like if I was doing it, what would that look like if the tool was helping me with that. So you can assess things like, are issues being flagged consistently? Does the output align with how we normally review these contracts? And that's really important. And is this helping the team focus their attention more effectively? I think the combination is exactly what we want in a pilot, where teams tend to kind of struggle when there's a start with very open-ended and highly subjective work that's a bit more complex. And starting there makes it harder to separate the AI capability from the legal judgment, and pilots become difficult to evaluate. We've seen when teams do start with contract review that they tend to see value emerge very quickly, and that's also something that's very helpful. So when you have that very quick results, you feel, oh, okay, this is actually something that I can start working with and something that I will be able to gauge a little bit faster than taking a more complex area that might take a longer time to see the results, so you don't get that instant gratification that some areas like review could help. So for example, within the first couple of weeks, teams will start to notice that their teams are spending less time orienting themselves in a document and more time focusing on the actual risk of that document. They're not reviewing less, they're reviewing better. And that early signal is often enough to give teams confidence that they're on the right path and ready to build and expand from there.
So yeah, I think that aligning AI to your legal standards and judgment, this is something that everyone kind of understands. They already have their standards, and it's a good way, as you said there, to kind of benchmark this. So we have a number of tools available to us to align with those internal standards. And we do try to keep it as simple and user-friendly as possible, but also at the same time allow teams to kind of bring in that detail that they are so used to having and sort of have developed over years of doing their job and reviewing these contracts and assigning and allocating risk. One of the tools that we're going to explore today is a playbook. And a playbook is LEGALFly's really structured approach that can be built from your existing playbooks. It can be built from your template contracts. It can be built from internal guidelines. But it allows teams to put in preferred positions. It allows them to use their existing risk thresholds. And for those teams that have them, where we have multiple fallback positions, where we maybe have fallback 1, fallback 2, and those red lines. We can then further provide redraft instructions and actually approved clauses as well. So we can kind of meet teams where they are in terms of their setup. If not, we can extract that from a template contract and allow users to fine tune as we are going. The second tool that we have in regards to aligning AI is using a custom agent where we can actually upload existing knowledge. That maybe that's precedent agreements that you just thought, you know what, I negotiated that really well. I want that one to kind of become a bit of a standard. And they can use this custom agent almost as like a negotiation partner when you're working directly in Microsoft Word. Have it up there, help me renegotiate this clause, help me renegotiate this agreement using previously agreed positions. This then allows them to go, okay, is that how I would mark up the document? Is that the suggestion that I would have made? If yes, great, AI is aligned to your standards. If no, what changes can we make so that it is redrafting in the way that you want it to be drafting to? This brings about, I think, a really important element to AI is consistency. If you're working in a global team, you're working across offices, across departments, you sort of need to all be singing from the same hymn sheet, as my grandmother would say. That allows teams to have that consistency and that control. So when we're looking at a rollout, I think, we've spent a bit of time there talking about how we're going to align it to the internal standards, and we want to reflect that judgment. I touched briefly there on kind of results are consistent across documents, and this is again where we want everyone working from the same playbooks, the same custom agents that are perhaps owned by legal and maybe rolled out to other members of the team so they can be updated, they're living, they stay up to date. You then want this review to be something that's explainable and actually trusted. And this is another big part of LEGALFly and something that we see as kind of like a core tenet. It's that grounding, it's that responsibility. We want users to be able to verify the answers that they're seeing very, very quickly. We all know that AI isn't perfect. So it's about when you read an answer and you go, well, that doesn't sound quite right to me. I know this area really well. We have lots of mechanisms and referencing, grounding and citing that LEGALFly will actually show you it's working in a way. And that again leads into kind of building that confident day-to-day use. And you start to go, okay, well actually, right, it does do this particular task really well. I can kind of rely on the outputs. If I need to, I can check it. I can come back to the platform after I've done a review. I can share this with my manager. There is that sort of audit trail to it, that log of what's happened, what's been changed, and where it has made changes. And I think that's really important for building confidence, particularly as you said in kind of a pilot with that review, getting there quickly for people to be like, right, now we can start thinking maybe about the longer, more complex workflows that we've already verified early accuracy and early consistent results.
Yeah, that's great.
And kind of all of that then leads for reduced need of oversight as part of it. So I think we've probably talked enough at this point, and I think what's be interesting now is actually to like, how do we do this? How do we say, let's take that core use case and how do we align something to our internal standards? So I'm just going to go ahead and, okay. So I'm in the LEGALFly platform, and where I'm going to jump into for this particular demo, as I think this is definitely one of the most core use cases, is actually creating a playbook. Now, I think for teams that already have a playbook in place, great, we already have something that we can upload, but perhaps you don't have a playbook and you're just like, I work from template agreements, I'm working from our existing standards, and this is what I have that's available. No problem. So we have a LEGALFly playbook builder, and what we can do is say upload a contract. For this example, let's do a data processing agreement. Now I'm going to set this as a golden contract, but as mentioned, it could be internal guidelines, maybe it's other, might be some legislation or regulation, anything you need to be turned into a set of checks. I'm going to leave that set for golden contract. I'm going to give it some context. So what do I want this playbook to do? So this playbook we use to redraft data processing agreements to ensure compliance with the standards as set out in the template. Just something brief to set it off in the kind of right direction, and then have the choice here to choose my level of complexity. A good way to think about this is the type of agreement. Is it a particularly complex, nuanced agreement? And then just generally the kind of length of it. Now, if you're unsure, just leave it on auto. You can have a look. We can always take out items or add more in. But for now, just so we're not spending a lot of time waiting for it to load, I'm just going to keep it on simple format. And we can now check as well, what type do we want? So are we assessing risk? Are we retrieving information from this contract? For this type, I'm actually going to select mainly assess risk. And I'm going to leave it as a risk assessment type, but you may choose to set up a compliance playbook as well. So we have built a prompt out here. And now what's happening in the background is our playbook builder is actually breaking down this document. It's taking that context and bringing together a number of different playbook items and checks that we can now use to, say, review a received data processing agreement. So if they won't sign up to your terms, we now have a playbook to hopefully bring it in line. So what LEGALFLY is doing now, and one thing that you might hear a lot with us, is that context is king. The more information you can kind of put in to this playbook, the better your results would be. So this is kind of asking just some more details around template notifications. In this instance, you might just say 72 hours. I would say if we are going through this process together, we'll spend a bit more time filling this out. It does yield better results for a playbook. I'm going to skip these remaining questions. And I'm just going to hit generate playbook. It's now to re-evaluating those checks that it's just made, adding in this additional context, taking that into consideration when drafting the checks, the redraft instructions, and the risk assessments as well. And so this is how we can go from no playbook, no AI playbook, just your template agreement into something that is really comprehensive and a good way to start getting a check. One point that I will note, the playbook builder itself is not optimized for speed. We're using a model that is actually better at kind of deep research, understanding, and accurate extractions. So this isn't kind of your chat interface where you're going to ask for something and it's going to generate it immediately. You'll see on the next screen when we do get there just the kind of level of detail that has been put into this playbook. But what we sort of say here, it's a little bit of short-term pain for that long-term gain. When it comes to pilots as well, what I like to do is make sure that all of these sort of playbooks, all of these tools are set up ahead of that time so that your users are logging into the platform to test and validate rather than go through that setup process. We've got our playbook. As you can see, I changed my mind halfway through. This is now a DPA playbook, not an NDA playbook. But we have our first 10 to 12 checks that we've got on the side. So we've got 10 here. And just to give you an overview as to like what's happened and what's been generated, it has taken the clauses, it has produced an assessment based on what's in the agreement. And because I gave it instructions to do so, it's also provided redrafts as well. We'll be spending a little bit of time looking at this maybe a little bit later as well. But for now, how do we now validate, how do we verify this playbook? So for Teams, you can do this straight within LEGALFLY. Maybe it's on Microsoft Word already. Let me just select a document. We can take our data processing agreement here. I'm going to add our playbook, which we've just created. I'll take the LEGALFLY one off. And now I can start this review. So sort of within the space there of about 5 to 6 minutes, we've just gone through how we can upload a contract and turn that into a LEGALFLY playbook. I am pleased to see that all of the items have passed on this playbook, as I would expect, because I built this playbook off the positions that are set out in this document. So this is a really quick way for me to kind of validate, all right, this is in the right area. Obviously, the next step of testing is to run that maybe on a third-party contract and see where that contract differs and see what changes would be made. But that's a good step where I can test it. I can click on these items. I can see where it's pulled out particular pieces particular areas within the contract. If I were to say, let's select another document, and let's just go with something short. What I'd hope to see in this is that now the data processing agreement playbook will provide us with some redraft suggestions as well, where sort of positions aren't actually in compliance with that playbook item. So it will actually propose amendments to bring it in line. There we go. We're starting to see some of the high risk items come through and a suggested redraft. This is where we can see those redrafts, we can see those approved clauses, and even see those kind of fallback positions. So we can really drill down into the detail where you have it. And I think a great question that probably teams ask themselves at this point is that how I would redraft the document? Is that change something I would make? Does that seem sensible? So it's a nice, easy way to validate that output. And I think this is why this is very much a use case that we see a lot. We have a good understanding of what good is. It's a very high volume use case, very repeatable process that in-house teams are dealing with a lot. So I hope that's given you a bit of an insight into how we could maybe take a use case, take what you already have, run that process through LEGALFLY, actually test and validate, and then evaluate the outputs as well. I appreciate I've rattled through that fairly quickly, so do please add your questions into the chat if there's anything that we can go back over.
Amazing. Thank you, Harry. Oh, perfect. There we go. Yeah, teams don't really just jump straight from pilot to full rollout. Instead, we see a clear progression, which is important to do. Because as we said earlier, as you're skipping steps, that tends to be where those pitfalls happen. And first comes a pilot where teams are kind of validating the quality and the fit, and then comes the confidence building, right? Then you can start to expand on the workflows that you've decided that are adjacent to what you're already working on. And it just becomes, instead, your governing is more formal, standard, you build those guardrails, and then the expectations are a bit more defined. And that's the point where you feel confident enough to roll it out to more wider users that make the most sense for your teams. And when the pilot has those clear goals and success criteria, the natural next step is usually very obvious. It's not debated anymore, right? Because at the beginning, that's really where a good part of these pilots are coming from. It's going to be both a debate and an understanding of how is this going to work for us. So a lot of this discussion around pilots and making sure that they're successful is making sure that you can go through this, through the process of the tools that you're choosing, and if it's going to give you the end result that you're looking for. So I first off just want to thank Harry for going through that demonstration. Also thank everyone here for spending the time with us today. We hope that you have a bit more of a clearer framework for designing and evaluating a legal AI pilot for your own team. And if you like to see this applied to your specific workflow, there is a QR code, so you can get a demo with us. You can follow us on LinkedIn also if you'd like. We're always happy to talk through real use cases and pilot designs as well. So as we mentioned, we're going to move into Q&A. We have about 15 minutes left of our session today to move into a Q&A. So we're going to, if you do have questions, please go ahead and type them in the Q&A section. They could be related to anything specific that we've already went over or anything in general. But we've already had a good amount of questions come in, so we can already start taking them. I know one question that I saw, which could help from for understanding more specifically when you were showing on those playbook pieces, like how does LegalFly know what our fallback positions or the risk thresholds are? Is there a way that you can set that up?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, this might just be a little more interesting if I share the demo again. So where we've got the preferred and fallback positions, now these ones are actually AI generated. LegalFly has taken a look at our standard position and built in what the pass statement look like, what low risk and high risk looks like. So this sets out the assessment for what that deviation might look like. And then we have down here our redrafts. So an easy one to sort of understand here is, say, payment terms. So maybe you have standard 30-day payment terms and you're like, we're happy to accept 30 days. 40 days is a low risk state and 90 days is sort of our high risk, we don't accept that. What LegalFly will be able to do is we can either provide instructions here, which would read, ensure payment terms are 30 days for the preferred position, or we could say our standard payment terms are 30 days from the date of invoice, and it will seek to insert that approved clause. The fallback can then be based on that 45 days. So where you do have this kind of information, where we do have this level of granularity, as I know that some teams do with their existing playbooks, we can kind of match them in their level of detail. You don't need to have these with a playbook. You can have a very simple playbook that is sort of more based around just your question. But we want to be able to support teams that do want this level of detail, that do want this level of granularity, because this again is sort of a really, really good way to dial in consistency. So we'll see teams maybe group legal sets and defines the playbook. Maybe we have regional variations, but it means that there's always that kind of centralized control. Everyone knows the positions in the playbooks, and they know that there's going to be consistency across using those.
The next question that I'm going to pull out, there's a couple specific ones about just tracking sensitive information and how do we make sure that contracts aren't just shared within the cloud. That is going to be the most important thing that you look for in your AI tool. If there's any feedback we can give today, take this, is that please look into the AI tool that you're using to make sure that they have very, very specific, secure information. Any secure AI tool will have their full security information right online so that you can access them publicly, that they're not hidden behind something, or they don't ask you, for your information to give you that information. All of that is really important. So when you are looking through your tools for your evaluation, you should look for the most secure tool that you can. So with LegalFly specifically, we are at bank secure levels, and our main focus is always making sure that you understand very quickly how secure the information you input is. Yeah.
And I've got a question here as well, sort of a little bit just off from playbook sort of standards, but more, does the tool also browse kind of local regulations to assess the compliance of the contract? You may have noticed in that demo, when I set up the review, there were a couple of options where you could actually choose the jurisdiction, and that will then allow it to access those general laws. The LegalFly playbooks will also then take that into kind of consideration as well. There are plenty of ways where we've already connected to legal databases and legal sources, so that maybe you're operating in the UK, but you need to review the agreement under, say, Swiss law or German law. LegalFly is connected to, probably at this point, hundreds of verified sources across the globe, just to ensure that you can actually access those regulations, directives, legislation, and ensure compliance at a legal level, not only with your own internal standards. But great question.
So someone asked, as you were building the playbook, if we have built-in playbooks. And there was also another specific question about LegalFly in general. Playbooks are not LegalFly specific. I think when we think about playbooks in general, we think a lot of the times when we're reviewing documents, it's in our head. We know exactly what we're looking for. We know the checks that we're looking for. We know our risk. We know our fallbacks. And a lot of the times we do not write them down. Okay? And a playbook is going to be something where you do write it down. Not do you just write it down, but you also put guidance and focus towards them. So everything that happens in your head, maybe you want someone else to have. Maybe someone else is running a document review and you want them to have that same information that you have. That is really what a playbook is for. So that was a tangent. Someone asked if LegalFly has built-in playbooks. Yes, LegalFly does have built-in playbooks. We have over 100 different documents built into our system, and each one of them has its own specific checks that are looking for, whether that's business checks or more legal specific checks. And so if you're coming into a system like LegalFly and you don't have anything built for your teams already, that's fine. There's a lot of different ways that you can use our system specifically, but I'm sure other systems as well, where you're actually choosing the document and then it will come with standard playbooks. Our playbook generator that we walked through today is a really easy, fast way to make sure that your documents are very quickly being built out with playbooks that are more specific to your organization, rather than something that's just a little bit more generic.
I think I'd add to that as well, because I think that there are situations where maybe you don't even have a template agreement, and you've actually all you've got is perhaps historic redlined agreements. So functionality that we can do with that playbook builder is get it to extract the redline changes and changes that you've made to a document previously. So even if you're kind of sitting there going, oh, well, I don't have standard documents, I just redline everyone's, then we can also work through that and kind of go, well, look, these are the changes that are being made. Let's take that assumption that those are your preferred positions, and we can actually kind of extrapolate from that. So yeah, we really do, even if you're out there with sort of the bare bones, that's fine. We can kind of get something going. And yeah, the LegalFly standard playbooks are also a great place to get that general review.
Yeah, you kind of answered another question, was does LegalFly have templates? So templates are a little different because templates are going to be more based off of your own company policies and standards. So there's not specific templates that are built in. You actually upload the templates to the system, but LegalFly can absolutely assess the templates that you may have to help build more strict templates or adjust templates as you need. By giving it the guidance that the system needs, it can help build templates that you can then use across different jurisdictions and regions, because that's also another part of that question is how are templates and can they be built for different regions or countries. And really it's going to be up to you when you're kind of going through the system and adding in those jurisdictions. You can be very specific about where you're asking your questions and how that would translate to your responses and answers and output. Yeah.
Got a question here that's actually just kind of a use case, so I'll just kind of very quickly summarize it. But they're working with sort of multiple banks and insurance companies, and the regulatory framework sort of varies state by state, federal law, forms, required documents, etc. They're producing certain products, so loan or life insurance. So the question is how can we sort of use AI agents to streamline those compliance workflows? So aligning it to those kind of particular standards with a custom agent, what we would seek to do there is sort of create a knowledge base of information that it has access to. So where we have the regulatory framework, we have the required documents and forms, and then we'll have an agent which guides users through that sort of workflow and process, referencing and citing what needs to be done at each kind of step. This is something that we see for lots of kind of compliance workflows where you're sort of building a form or a product as you go through it. But no, really interesting use case. Do let us know if you want to explore that in a bit more depth.
Yeah. Can I review a document for compliance with applicable laws and regulations in certain jurisdictions? Just generally, when you are reviewing a document, and this is both reviewing but also asking questions, this was also something specific that was asked, is where can I change set jurisdictions? Our system automatically chooses a jurisdiction that is related to the document. So it's not like an extra step you have to go through. If my jurisdiction that's set in my settings is England and Wales, which it currently is, my document that I'm looking at on the page is a Belgium specific, so it has Belgium specific laws inside, so it automatically chooses that jurisdiction. And then as you're asking questions, and I think that that's also the important piece when running your review, as you're asking questions, you can always prompt your AI to particular regions or jurisdictions, but also any time that you are asking questions in our system, the collections specifically for your jurisdiction are always going to be up to you to choose. So you'll be able to select what type of jurisdiction, different jurisdictions, and also be able to see the questions and where they're being sourced. Where are these answers coming from, and how can I be a bit more granular with where these questions are being asked so that I know that I'm getting more of a clear and reliable answer from these sources. That's also really important.
And I think actually, whilst we're sort of talking about those sources, there's a question just sort of around regulations being up to date. So when we connect to a source, we establish effectively a data pipeline with that source, and that means that we can always pull the most frequent regulations, even ones that are sort of being proposed, so that we're always kind of up to date with that. I don't think I've ever really heard of LEGALFLY being out of date, because that's something that we're doing almost on not a fully continuous basis, but an incredibly regular and high frequency basis, to kind of ensure that actually we are remaining up to date as laws and regulations change. Luckily, it's very rare that legal changes things massively overnight, so we kind of have that on our side. But you can always see the sources, as Kristin just showed, and always kind of query, is that getting up to date? We do also have an agent that is designed for horizon scanning, so do let us know if that's kind of particular interest to you.
Perfect. Just wanted to point out real quick, there's about 5 minutes left of our Q&A section. So if you haven't put in your questions yet, please submit them, because even if we don't get to them today, we will still get to them once the webinar is over. So don't worry, if we are running out of time, we will still be able to respond and get your question answered. There was a question that came in about kind of automation, being able to process an AI agent, specifically with online contracts. So there's not a way to immediately connect an agent to an online source at the moment. However, if any data that is stored in LEGALFLY, you can run an agent on, whether you're creating a custom agent because you have a very particular output that you want. And our team, specifically Harry and his team, really are great at giving that advice for our pilots, for our organizations, on how to best leverage ways to customize them to automate that process. So whether it's validating data within your document or going through that is going to be what the custom agent is used most for, but not automating of like activated contracts or things like that. So there's different things that we can absolutely build into the automation of custom agents. It just depends on your use case, but it's a good one.
No, exactly.
Nice. Someone asked if how long should a pilot realistically run before you make that rollout decision? It really just depends, but generally we find the most successful ones are shorter. Yeah. Not like a week short, but sometimes it can be a few weeks, 4 weeks, 8 weeks. It's one of those where it also depends on the use cases, and maybe you can also...
I was gonna say, yeah. My sweet spot is a month, really. Yeah. Anywhere 2 weeks to a month, I find to be really good. The reason being, I think a week is too short, is people are really, really busy, and if you might turn up one day and you've just had a really horrible project dropped on your desk that needs to be done that week, and that's just unavoidable. So it becomes quite restrictive there. But for me, and particularly with, I think, like AI pilots, you need a feedback step in there, at least one. The reason being is you hopefully have seen on the demo, the level of detail that we can do really does impact what that outcome looks like. And so the chances of me knowing exactly what great looks like to you as a hole-in-one is quite low. But give me 2 attempts at it with some feedback, and we go from something that's maybe 60% from the I've just chucked it through the playbook builder and it's made an assessment to, okay, that was great, Harry, here's some feedback, here's actually how I want it to redraft, can we change that risk categorization, can we tweak this? So all of a sudden now we're sort of in the 85 to 95% kind of performance range. So it will depend a little bit on users, but I think for me, you want to make sure that you, give people enough time if something comes up to test it. You have a feedback session in there so that you can tweak it, because AI is so customizable. I'm going to say it again, and if you are ever on a call with me, I'll probably be saying it all the time. Context is king. The more information we can give it, the more consistent, the more reliable those kind of outputs are going to be. But for me, a month is always great. Gives everyone a little bit of breathing room. We don't feel too rushed through it, but I'm running a number of 2-week pilots at the moment, which I think is great because that saves the team time on their side. You don't want to be testing tools infinitely, and you can get to a decision really quickly. So yeah, that's length is an important factor. You don't want it to drag on forever either.
Yeah. Because sometimes also when you drag on forever, you start realizing, oh, what about this one?
Yes.
What about that one?
Yeah.
And so you get out of this very narrow window that you want to stay within so that you can stay focused, and then people just start doing this. It's like, like you have to just drag pull them back in. Okay, I think we'll pick a last question. I think we've already touched on the security piece of it, but this question is a little bit more on people have told them, do not use AI, do not upload contracts to AI. Because if you have identifiable data, if you have personal data in there, we don't want them being shared across AI platforms. And that is a very common request for many teams, but also potentially a misconception for all AI tools that they all are the same, and that's not the case. So when I mentioned earlier about researching your AI tool, it's very, very important to do that so that you can understand how information is shared. So with LEGALFLY, our information is very clear about both the models that we have, our anonymization model, and how we work across different AI tools to make sure that the information stays stored very securely, because the anonymization model that we have removes all identifiable secure information from those documents before it even touches an AI. So that is one of the biggest pieces about a tool being having that security piece that is so, so important. Would you add any other thing to that?
Honestly, no notes on that one. I think you got it all.
Perfect. There's other questions coming in and other questions that are here, but we want to truly thank you all so much for your time today in our how to run a successful AI pilot. And hopefully we're able to get a good amount of information, and any further questions, just let us know. And thank you all for your time, and we hope you have a great day.
Cheers guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.